We're still in lockdown. I'm connected on Zoom to my buddy Dayv, which can mean only one thing. It's time for the Constant Geekery Podcast.
Well, spin my nipple nuts and send me to Alaska.
What are nipple nuts?
I don't know. I've got a feeling that's a quote from Red Dwarf, Pete. It's the first thing that came into my head. Now, it's slightly disturbing that the first thing that came into my head after I saw you on Zoom was nipples. So,
if you make a rimmer comment, I will not be impressed.
Let's just move on. Look, I have a glass of whiskey, which is, I'm holding it up to the camera there. So if you're watching us on YouTube, and we still don't have our own URL yet, which we need to do, but
we really ought to sort that out.
I think we have to have the channel up for a certain number of days, but you can find us by going to youtube.com/Constant Geekery and then just click on the link that you'll find on that page to find the podcast channel. Anyway.
So if you're wondering what we look like, you'll be sorely disappointed.
I've got a glass of whiskey, and this week I am again drinking Tam na Bhulin, but this is marginally different to the last time I had Tam na Bhulin on the podcast, because this is the sherry cask edition, Pete.
Oh,
and I haven't actually tasted it yet.
That is a sweet choice. Yeah. Go on then, live on pre-recorded podcast. Do it. Oh, if you ever wondered what his face looks like,
well, it's delicious. That's all I'm going to say about that, and that's going to go down far too easily, I think. Pete, I can't help but notice that you're wearing glasses. Is this some effort to appear sophisticated and or intelligent?
If it was an effort to do those things, I accept that it's failing badly. No, it's we're going to talk about supply of technology a bit later, but the supply of contact lenses has been an issue this week as well. So I'm donning the spectacles, and perhaps viewers would be interested to know what I've got to drink this week.
Well, they might be. Have you got anything interesting to drink?
Are you interesting? Well, I actually have a bottle of Lefroy.
So you do. You're not going to drink it though, are you?
Yeah. No, I've got a Pepsi Max to drink. I just wanted to show that I am sophisticated and I do enjoy a single malt, or at least I did enjoy a single malt up until the joys of Gout kicked in. If you've never had Gout, you don't want it.
You don't. And the problem with Pepsi Max, though, is it is quite a gaseous drink, and it does have side effects, which we for your viewing and listening pleasure, folks, edit out. However, what I should say is that my son, Tom, who is 15, his job each week is to edit the podcast. So we do like to pop in the odd little Easter egg of Windy Pops just for his pleasure. Either that or some really difficult jokes, some adult content. No, I don't mean adult content. That's not what I meant.
No, I don't know.
I'm going down the wrong road here.
Backpedal.
No, adult humour, as in things that you don't want to listen to your dad talking about ever. So we try and put a few of those things in just for Tom's benefit. And he in return has been editing together, Pete, I should let you know, a fairly comprehensive gag reel, which mainly consists of us belching into the microphone, from what I can see.
Does he have enough of them yet to sort of edit a tune together? Because that would be quite impressive.
I'm sure it's something nasty is going to come one of these days, and he has all the passwords.
And we will have
He'll just upload it, and we'll be able to do nothing about it.
Anyway, moving on to the podcast this week. Have you had? Because obviously during lockdown, although we run a business together, we don't see each other much at the moment. Talk on the phone. But how's your week gone? Haven't seen you much this week. Anything to report?
One or two things. Yeah, it's been an interesting week. So I think it was lunchtime, Monday or Tuesday last week, and my wife likes to bake bread for lunch, and I get pretty hungry around lunchtime, and the thought of freshly baked bread with a bit of soup, some cheese, and some butter puts me in a bit of a sort of anxious mood, ready to get eating as soon as I possibly can. So I was pulling out a breadboard, and in our kitchen we got a sort of little collection of breadboards and chopping boards all sort of stacked up together, and someone had stacked a smaller one in between two larger ones.
Okay.
So it wasn't immediate.
So
Go on.
just to be clear, this isn't a collection. When you say collection, it's not like people collect like ornaments or fine china. It's a collection of breadboards or chopping boards for practical purposes in different sizes and for different things. Is that what you're talking about? You don't have some weird breadboard collection fetish?
No, I haven't got them like mounted on the wall or anything. And I, just sort of just for appreciation purposes. No. So anyway, I pull out the breadboard quite vigorously because it
would be a really boring YouTube channel.
The smell of warm bread, smell of the soup. I was anxious to get on with the job and get my face in amongst that food. And so I pull out the breadboard, and this smaller breadboard sandwiched between the two also came out with some ferocity and landed squarely on my big toe on my left foot. And I imagine to any onlookers it would have looked like I was doing some sort of Native American rain dance. And I'm not a potty mouth, Pete. But I can.
No, you're very restrained when it comes to the colourful vernacular.
I had to bite my tongue. I had some choice words. I kid you not. Like I've been through some painful experiences in my life, physical pain, and this ranks right up there. It was agony. So anyway, it turns out I've broken my toe. So I can't walk properly, and this is even a struggle just sitting at the desk. And
so have you got it in a cast or something?
No, because that would involve going to hospital, and
I don't think they put toes in casts.
No,
anyway.
they give you a boot. Give you a boot to wear. I opted not to do that. What I decided to do instead was leave it for a few days, and rest and see how it went. And my toe has turned black, but other than that, it was. It's fairly okay. And then I spent yesterday working outdoors, burning rubbish and stuff, and I aggravated it. So I've been in absolute agony, Pete. Anyway, because of all of that experience, I thought I need to cheer myself up. So I thought what I'll do is I'll buy myself Flight Simulator 2020.
Do you know, I was wondering how we would segue broken toes back into something vaguely related to technology and geekery, but you have managed to do it. So well done. I applaud you for that. So, God, yes, Flight Simulator 2020.
Yeah, and I cleared my afternoon on Wednesday to purchase it and download it. And very excited to play the new game and fly some airplanes. And what happens is you download it on Steam. And the installer or the download is suspiciously small, so I'm thinking it's obviously going to download more content as it goes. When you install an Xbox game and it'll install so far, and then you can start to play it with limited functionality and whilst it downloads in the background. No such luck with Microsoft Flight Simulator. So it just comes up with this download window and says it's going to download I think it was 129 gigabytes.
Wow. That's a lot of data.
It's a lot of data. And it took a long time to do, but I'll come back to that in a minute. The annoying thing is, this window, if you cancel it, I was sort of like looking up on YouTube, can I pause this, come back to it? And people are saying it doesn't really work very well. So you've just got to leave it going, downloading. But they've put this music track on it. I say music track, I mean that... it's 30 seconds of music on a loop is what it is. And it's highly...
Is it lift music?
It is basically lift music. Elevator music if you're listening in the States. And it's irritating. Very irritating. Anyway, I muted my speakers using my audio interface. And then I just left it downloading because I gave up waiting for it and, wasted my afternoon. When I left my cabin, which I'm sat in at the moment, which I share with my father. That's a story for another day. Yes, I do indeed live with my parents, but it's not as bad as it sounds. And I switched off my audio interface without thinking and left the cabin. And the PC has a little speaker on the front of it, so it kind of switched when it recognised that I'd switched off the... You see where I'm going with this? The audio interface. It just flicks over to this little speaker in the front of the PC, which is really quiet. And then the next day, of course, my foot's sore, so I'm staying in. We had a whole load of meetings, if you remember, on Thursday, and I sort of sat upstairs and did them. So my poor dad comes out here to do his work. He's an architect, and he's got the desk right opposite mine, and all he can hear all morning is this tune on constant repeat. So he ends up he finally realizes what it is, and then he plugs his headphones into the front of the PC to stop the noise. But it was still then coming out the headphones, so he ended up tucking the headphones into a drawer. He had a proper miserable morning with it. What a joke!
Oh, that is priceless. I realise this feels like a podcast of anecdotes this week, but hopefully they'll be vaguely amusing. It reminds me of a little gag I played on my eldest son, who's 20, and obviously with lockdown we're all working from home at the moment. He's a developer, and he's working in the room across from where I'm doing this podcast now. And he watches a sci-fi series called The Expanse, which is very popular, very good. And what I did is I created a ringtone on my other son's iPhone using GarageBand and some MP3 samples of the Expanse intro theme. But I curved it up and down so it started getting louder and then would drop away and then come back in. And then I hid the phone. One of our dogs sort of spends most of its time in his room, so there's a dog bed in there. So I put it under the dog bed and then put the dog back on top of it. And put it down at such a level that basically throughout the day we just all were ringing that phone, and he'd get the Expanse theme sort of ethereally wandering through his room, and I could hear him coming out onto the landing trying to work out where it was coming from. This went on for hours. It brought a lot of mirth and joy. But that was deliberate, unlike your flight simulator episode. But you got to do things in lockdown just to keep yourself from going stir crazy.
Yeah, by making someone else go stir crazy.
Absolutely, that's the way to do it. So did your download get there in the end?
Yeah, it must have finished in the early hours of the following morning. So,
but come on, Microsoft. I mean, surely in 2021, download managers have been around. I can remember download managers being around 20 years ago, and browsers and Steam even do it in the background. It's not exactly hard technology to implement, is it? What are they thinking?
I mean, they could have just given you a little bit of the world so that you can fly in that little bit whilst it downloads the rest. Of course, there's another issue to it as well.
Sort of like around Luton Airport would be quite nice, wouldn't it?
Some fabulous scenery around Luton. Steam, they have a refund policy, but it's only for 2 hours. So 2 hours after you install and start the game, that's how long you've got to get a full refund because of the digital delivery system and everything. And of course, it logs you as though you're playing the game the moment you run the downloader. So,
well, that's a bit of a faux pas.
Yeah, apparently Steam have made an exception for it. Although I don't know why you'd want to get a refund. It is a fantastic game. It's just that it takes forever to download. My internet here isn't the fastest in the world. I think I'll get a fairly solid 40 megabit download, and it took a long time to download. So just be warned. It's also very difficult to
bit like downloading Big Sur on the day it was launched.
Well, yeah, quite. It's very difficult to fly as well without having a control stick. I just assumed, well, I'm going to buy one of those, yokes, basically. I'm waiting for your excellent jokes, Pete.
Well, by the way you led into it about, I wanted to buy one of those yokes, suggests that you didn't. So it suggests that your yoke plans were scrambled.
Yeah, there we go. That was a bit of a paltry effort, Pete, if we're honest.
It was foul, honestly.
It was. Let's move on. You can't buy them anyway. You can't buy the controllers for love nor money. They are sold out everywhere. A lot like this seems just to be the theme of tech at the moment. Obviously, Flight Sim's been massively popular. Obviously, lots of people are sat at home with time on their hands to fly a Flight Sim, and so lots of people are going out and buying these control surfaces. But yeah, very frustrating. So I thought instead, what might be sort of add to the realism of the experience would be to get some VR. And I was quite excited about the idea of this.
Ooh.
And I thought, get some VR.
So what, some Google Cardboard or something like that?
I thought I would go just a little bit more premium. So I bought myself an Oculus Rift S, and I got it all set up and did the various sort of stuff, and it's very interesting and cool. But I was a little bit disappointed at the resolution. I'll be honest, wasn't quite as good as I expected. And then I loaded up Flight Sim. I got it working, put the headset on, looking around the plane. Absolutely brilliant. You can look out the window, it's just fantastic. So I'm thinking, this is great. So I set myself up in a plane on Gibraltar. Thought I'll take off and, do a loop around the rock. And so taking off, that was kind of okay. And then I banked the plane over and looked sideways out the window and almost vomited. So that was that. I took the headset off and thought, I don't much like this. I tried it also with a driving game, Assetto Corsa. I thought that would be good. It took about an hour to get it working because it just doesn't work straight out the box like it's supposed to. But anyway, I got it working. And I didn't even manage half a lap of the track I was on before, again, I felt like I was going to throw up. So VR is not for me, it would seem. So I packed it all away, and I shall be returning it to Amazon. So that
maybe some puke stains on it.
Maybe, yeah. I pity the person that gets that return. The week has been rubbish. It's it should have been a tech adventure. It should have been exciting. I should have been playing games and trying out new tech. And instead, I've mainly just been nursing my toe, which is black.
Well, I am sorry to hear
black?
that. You did mention that, yeah.
So I think maybe we ought to.
Yeah.
Let's go from talking about flying, Pete, to talking about flying.
Okay, yeah, just segue into something completely different. I was interested in, we mentioned briefly last week, I think, at CES 2021, Sony released more details about the hotly anticipated Airpeak drone. And when I say they released more details, they said it is now available, but then proceeded to not give any pricing, availability, or any details whatsoever on where you can get it, and rather release some admittedly pretty impressive footage of it in use. For those that don't know, the Airpeak drone, it is pretty big for a drone, but Sony is saying it's the smallest drone that can basically mount their Alpha series cameras. And it has AI and all sorts of clever stuff in it. And it looks very cool. And it turns out it's actually aimed at professional filmmakers for the time being. So Sony is setting up a special, what they call project, which is the way they introduce new products now, rather than just releasing it. They do a project, and they're actually starting a new business to support this, which presumably will be called Airpeak, and there'll be presumably other Airpeak drones coming in due course. And of course, Sony have done this in the past. So I got quite excited about it, and then found out there wasn't any real substance to it. So we still have to wait. But I did think in spring, it seems that more information will be released on the Airpeak, which is good timing for Sony because, of course, DJI have been banned in the US, or at least the Department of Commerce in the US have put them on a list. And as I understand it, it basically means that they can't use US technology in their products moving forward. So it isn't going to be that they can't sell their products or that DJI products will just be off the shelves in the US overnight. But they could have supply chain problems moving forward. So we've got DJI drones. Many, I'm sure, out there have got DJI drones. They're really good pieces of kit. And it may be a cause of concern that they can perhaps have difficulty getting into certain markets. So having a viable alternative might be one of the more prosumer or consumer Sony Airpeaks when they come along, might be interesting. But I was got very excited, and then kind of it was almost felt like and then let you down.
Well, again, that seems to be the story of technology releases at the moment, doesn't it? It's an interesting thing, though. I mean, it's obviously I fly a Mavic 2 Pro drone, I'll come back to that in a minute. It's a great drone, but yeah, DJI, I do know everywhere you've been. We're recording the podcast now. The video is being taken care of by Osmos, DJI Osmos at each end. We've also got some other gimbals, and we've got the Ronin as well, haven't we? So
the Ronin, it's great gear. It's really good gear.
But
in actual fact, I was thinking the other day about DJI and how they have done what we said when you were doing the watch strap reviews on the main Constant Geekery channel. You've obviously done a recent set of reviews, and we did some time back, and we said a lot of these companies have really good products that are coming out of China, but they just haven't got the branding right. Whereas DJI absolutely have. It's a good quality product, and they've invested in the markets they want to sort of dominate in, and they've westernized, if you like, the brand, and that's one of the reasons it does so well.
They bought Hasselblad as well. That's why you get a Hasselblad branded camera on the Mavic 2 Pro. All of this sort of ties in. We were going to have a bit of a longer discussion about drones, but I've neglected to do my research this week because I was too busy with other very important things, as you've just found out. But all of the legislation in the UK changed from the 1st of January this year. And we're now in a transition period, and I think we've got a couple of years. And the basic gist of it is that if you've previously done a commercial certificate, that's kind of irrelevant now. There's new laws that apply. Anything that's 250 grams or below, you can basically do anything you like with that. And everything that's above is a bit more restrictive than it used to be. What's worse is that once we get out of the transition period, drones will have to be sold in the UK with the class number per the legislation. What class it belongs to needs to be printed on the drone. And mine obviously doesn't have that on because it predates. So what will happen is in 2 years' time, you'll be able to go and buy the Mavic 2 Pro, assuming that DJI haven't replaced it by then, with the appropriate stamp on it to say which class it belongs to, and that will be legal. And my drone will not. It will be obsolete because it doesn't have, even though it's absolutely identical.
You're kidding.
No, that's currently the way it's going to work. And I just wonder who is making these decisions. Because the 250 gram drone, now, if you want a 250 gram drone, the DJI Mini, the new one, is 249 grams. You can buy one of those and you can take it absolutely anywhere, and it's fantastic by all accounts. But it's a heck of a lot cheaper than the Mavic 2 Pro. So what you're doing is you're taking away all of the restrictions from the people who spend the least amount of money on the drone, arguably the least amount of time getting certified and qualified, and have the least incentive to fly safely and look after the gear and everything else. And you completely deregulate that. Well, to all intents and purposes, you deregulate those people. And then the guys who've invested really heavily, you shaft them. It's absolutely bizarre behaviour.
It sounds like another one of these rules that's just not been thought through properly. You know, like even now the cookie laws, just no one's thought those through and the implications of them. And when you try and regulate technology, that's fine. I get that certain technology needs to be regulated. I get that drones need to be regulated. There are obvious security concerns and safety concerns about making sure that they're regulated. But you've just highlighted a really good point there with the fact that those that are least likely to invest in those skills are going to be rocking around with their little death drones, their little mini death drones. When you are legislating technology, get people who know the technology and understand and think through the implications rather than some bureaucratic mandarin to do it.
Yeah.
That sounds slightly political, so we'll probably leave it there.
It does, yeah. In fairness, it's not the government in the UK, it's the Civil Aviation Authority that's responsible for all of this. A couple of years ago, they made it mandatory to register. You know, you have to register as a flyer, which is free, and you have to register if you're operating equipment. So I have remote control helicopters as well. which are all covered by the legislation. Remote control aeroplanes and helicopters are all under the same legislation. And you have to pay, it's only £9 a year, but that's what you've got to pay to be an operator, and you have to put your operator number on all of your models.
Well, it's interesting to see they're doing it that way, but there's still time for them to refine that regulation before it is enforced. So maybe they'll see sense and refine it a bit further to make it slightly less cumbersome.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
And shall we move on to another tech topic, Pete?
Yeah, it's a bit of a pick and mix of tech topics this week, isn't it? A veritable licorice all sort. What we're going to talk about next.
You've said licorice. Anytime someone says licorice all sort to me, it makes me want licorice all sorts, Pete. Now I want licorice all sorts. Do you get licorice all sorts in the States? Or?
And of course you get licorice all sorts in the States.
Do they, though? I don't know. Or wherever you're listening in the world, perhaps leave us a comment if you head over to YouTube and tell us if you understand what licorice all sorts are. We shall see.
If not, I'll bring some on to the next podcast.
Excellent. Oh,
for those that don't know. And I'd also be interested to know if anyone's interested in us talking about drone regulation more,
yeah,
and that kind of thing. It'd be interesting to know if that's something that's of interest or if we're droning on.
Yeah, let's move on. Your dad jokes, honestly, Pete, they just get worse and worse. Pete, let's talk about PC versus Mac without wanting to drop an incendiary bomb into the proceedings, because people
bookmark that in the comments. We talk a load of rubbish for 25 minutes and then PC versus Mac and everyone will scrub to it. Go on then. What do you want to talk about today?
Well, I would like to talk in more detail over coming podcasts about where Apple's going and where PCs are going. And we had an interesting conversation actually the other day, didn't we, about processors, and maybe that's next week's podcast. We haven't done much content yet about my new video workstation, but we will do that. Spoiler alert, it is a PC. So,
if you hadn't guessed.
Which is also why I'm, downloading things like Flight Sim 2020, because I can. I don't want to get into the whole Mac versus PC debate per se, because they both have their strengths and weaknesses. What I just wanted to touch on today is the fact that I have an M1 Mac Mini on my desk and a PC now, and I need to use both of them for different things. And I think that's an interesting topic in itself, and maybe we have time to talk about that today. But first of all, I just wanted to talk about keyboard and mouse, because something that Apple does really well is the human interface devices, with the exception of the charging port location on the Magic Mouse, which is just beggars belief. But
what a silly place to
actually, I don't like the Apple Mouse. I haven't used one in a long time. I use the Magic Trackpad, and which I really like.
And you're wrong. Well, you're wrong, but carry on.
What you can't argue with, though, for any of these devices is that they're well made. They're quality items. They're made with premium materials, and the keyboard and mouse combo that I got supplied with my PC workstation, it creaks, Pete. Do you know what I mean?
Does it feel like it? Do you remember Cherry keyboards from the sort of late 80s, early 90s?
I see.
They haven't really PC keyboards that you get with a workstation haven't really changed much.
Well, I'd argue that, because there's actually a massive market now for Cherry keyboards. People really love those, especially the original IBM keyboards. Yeah,
really.
You're so out of touch, Pete.
I'm out of date on that one.
And
I am.
I do, in fact, have one of those clickety keyboards, but as I said earlier, I share the office with my father. I don't think he'd appreciate me making that racket all day. So it's not a Cherry switched keyboard. It's a membrane keyboard. It's just it's plastic, and it's perfectly serviceable as a keyboard and mouse. It's fine, but it's just not premium. And when you've invested money into a computer, quite a lot of money, you want it to be premium. So I did my research, and I came up with the solution is apparently the Logitech MX Master series, and they do a keyboard which is metal and a very nice mouse. They're not particularly cheap, but the mouse was easy to get. The keyboard is another one of these pieces of tech that's proven very popular and is like hen's teeth, frankly. I got lucky. I found some that got into stock, and I managed to snag one before they went out of stock. What's interesting about these things is they can connect to the usual Logitech receiver, or you can connect via Bluetooth. And there's a switch on them, so they can each connect to 3 devices. So you can connect it to your PC and to your Mac. You see where I'm going with this? And the keyboard itself has got all of the Mac button positions marked on it and the PC buttons. So it's specifically designed to be used in this kind of scenario. So 1 keyboard, 1 mouse on my desk, 2 computers with completely different operating systems, and just press a button to switch it over. Even better than that, Logitech make something called Flow with the mouse. So I can move the mouse to the edge of my PC screen, and it will then appear on my Mac screen. Yeah, really? And then back again. And you can even
that is very neat.
Copy and paste, and even drag and drop files, I believe, as well.
I like technology like that. That's well thought through. How's it work?
It doesn't. Well, sometimes it does, but basically, you know how people have been saying to us that I'm having loads of Bluetooth issues with my M1 Mac, and we've been saying we haven't had any Bluetooth issues with our M1 Mac. Well, guess what, Pete?
Are you having Bluetooth issues with your M1 Mac?
And it is so annoying. So
You didn't hear it first here, folks.
Honestly, if you're one of these people that is suffering with Bluetooth issues, oh my goodness, it's crazy. It just sometimes just will randomly not connect at all. Then it will connect. With the Flow thing, it will work for a moment, and then it won't work, and you end up with the mouse invariably.
And that's so infuriating when you have that intermittent operate. It renders it useless, doesn't it?
Works perfectly with Intel Macs, by the way. No issues at all there. Just doesn't work with this particular M1 Mini that's on my desk. So pretty frustrated about that.
Frustrating.
So I thought it was useful for us just to share that little M1 issue. And I don't want to be down on the M1 all the time. You know, I think this is an issue though that Apple knew about and didn't bother doing anything to fix. And you remember we did a video on the main channel where we tested Wi-Fi performance as well. And we had quite a few naysayers who didn't think we'd done the test right, or didn't agree or whatever. But I've seen plenty of evidence to suggest that we are not alone in getting slow Wi-Fi performance either.
Yeah.
And do you remember the other issue that we had?
Oh, what with the hard disk speed?
Yeah, so this is specifically with the USB ports, just not running at it was about 25% slower with the Samsung T5. So I've got this kind of weird setup in here. I've got my monitor in front of me, and it has a USB hub built into it. And I've got a direct attached storage array with 5 hard disks in, which is in the cupboard below my desk, and that is plugged into the monitor. And so when I connect the monitor is then connected to my PC. So I boot up my PC, I can access all of my disks. I also have the option of connecting my Mac Mini up to the monitor via USB-C, and if I do that, it can access all of the disks.
That sounds like a sweet solution.
It's a usable solution when you want to access things in 2 places. The problem is that the speed on the Mac is so much slower than on the PC,
right?
Which is equipped with the 10 gigabit USB port. Not that you need that much for spinning hard disks, but there we go. It's very frustrating. And of course, because I've been using Mac for such a long time, I had my hard disks all formatted in HFS, for Apple. And I use a tool on the PC called by Paragon Software called HFS Plus, which allows you to read all the disks, which I purchased a few years ago, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but for some reason my download link doesn't work anymore. So I just downloaded the latest version of the software, ran the trial, and when the trial expired, I put my serial number into into the software and doesn't work. Try to submit a support request on their website, put my email address in, and it says it's not a valid email address because some idiots coded some, email verification thing and not factored in the fact that you might have .co.uk, for example.
That's good skills right there.
So the point of this tale is I could have spent another $20, which is a piddly amount of money, on a license, but instead I reached out to Paragon twice and they've completely blanked me. Haven't bothered responding at all. So I just want to out them here on the podcast and say, if you're thinking about buying Paragon HFS Plus, don't. They're a sucky company who don't care about their customers. And as a result of that, I spent 2 days copying all my data off, reformatting the disks to exFAT so that they can be read by both Apple and Windows. Now, why on earth cannot Microsoft recognize Apple disks? And vice versa. The Mac will read NTFS disks, but it won't write to them. Why can't they get their act together and sort that out? Why do we have to rely on third parties? That's question one.
Yeah.
Actually, there isn't a question two. It's just that question. Why?
Yeah. I guess it's just not a priority for them, isn't it? But clearly it's not a priority for Paragon, it would seem,
I'm
either.
pretty disappointed with that. Anyway, the whole process was made much longer because I was using the Mac Mini to do the copying, and I'm thinking, why on earth is it taking so long? And that was the reason. So it may seem like, and I think we even said this in the video, that those issues are not game stoppers. They're not deal breakers. But actually, for me, it's pretty damn close to being a deal breaker. And I know from the comments, there are lots of people who've bought these and sent them back as a result of these issues.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where if it's affecting your day-to-day workflow, because we've talked about this on the other flip side of actually, if you're just using it for content consumption and things like that, you may not always notice a difference with more power, more performance. We're not talking specifically about the M1 here. We're just talking about more graphics, more CPUs. You may not always notice it. But paradoxically, what seem like little things, like, it's 25% slower when you plug in a hard drive, or the Wi-Fi is slower, or my mouse keeps dropping out. Those are the sort of things that day to day do slow you down. They get you out of your flow. I mean, I've had it with the M1 where my Magic Mouse will just disconnect. So you're in the middle of trying to move around. You've got two screens up and the mouse disconnects. And what you're trying to do is you're working on maybe a couple of complex spreadsheets, pulling together some data or some formulas or whatever it might be. And you're suddenly interrupted from that because of connectivity, speed, whatever it is. And that pulls you out of your workflow and your productivity so much more than if you click on something and it takes a few microseconds more to open. And that's why these things are so important. The M1 could be the most blistering thing ever, forevermore. But if you then bottleneck it at the points where you're actually interfacing with it, what's the point?
Well put, Pete. Yeah, it's very true. The human interface with your computer is incredibly important. And Apple know that. That's the frustrating thing. For the longest time, the trackpad on an Apple laptop, there are very few Windows machines that can hold a candle to the Apple trackpad. Very few. And Apple have just got it so right. But then at the same time, actually, they've got it really wrong because of you think about the keyboard faux pas that they've had. So perhaps they're not the legends that we think they are. But there's another great example, though. You get a crummy keyboard, and it's a horrible typing experience. Remember when we first got the 15-inch MacBook Pros?
You're talking the scissor keyboard, or no, butterfly? It was the butterfly, wasn't it?
I think you had. I don't know. I get confused. The
one that nobody liked.
And they did a few variations of it because the one that's on my 13-inch MacBook Pro is actually pretty good, although it has been replaced once, I should say. But the one that was on the 15-inch that we had before wasn't as nice to type on. And it spoils the whole experience. we pay a lot for our tools. When you're a professional, some people don't understand why you'd spend so much money on a computer. Well, it's our professional tool. It's why your local mechanic, he buys from the Snap-on man, doesn't he? He comes around, doesn't go down to the local DIY shop and buy a pack of cheap tools. They invest in quality stuff that will last.
Next time he's in Lidl, doesn't go, brilliant, they finally got that that engine winch in that I've been looking for.
No, funnily enough, they don't do that. Yeah.
No.
So I just think Apple they hyped up the M1 so much. They hype all of their products so much, and the reality doesn't quite measure up. That user experience, they've fallen a little bit flat with that, and they must have known. That's the thing I keep coming back to. They must have known that these issues existed.
Yeah, but equally, and I'm not in any way defending Apple here, but as we commented at the beginning of the podcast, how often we've seen, particularly with tech in the last 12 months, promises of delivery and then nothing happening. We've seen it with NVIDIA. We've seen it with
AMD.
Name's gone completely out of my... Thank you, AMD. We've seen it with Sony with their Airpeak. The Sony Vision S car, which was billed as the Tesla Challenger, turns out that's not actually ever going into production, despite them featuring it a couple of weeks ago at CES 2021. It is just a platform for developing AI-based technology for cars, but it is never actually going to see the light of day. So you get all these tech companies raising you up and then saying, "Oh, it's delayed. Oh, yeah, you'll be able to get it in 2022 or whatever." At least Apple deliver. So yes, they probably did know, but they probably, who was it who said, shipping is so important. You got to ship, and the quote escapes me, but at least they deliver product, and they do tend to fix things where it's not physically, like hardware where you have to just iterate. But when it comes to software stuff, I would imagine, unless these issues with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and USB are down to the chipsets being used, I would imagine at some point they will be addressed.
Yeah. In fairness, I've only started getting Bluetooth issues since I've been using the USB ports on the back of the Mac Mini, as in the Type A ports. I suspect it's an interference issue, that's because USB 3 emits radio frequencies in that 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. So it's a problem, it's a real thing, and Apple just haven't done a very good job, I suppose, of shielding it. But then at the same time, you could argue, well, if you do a great job of shielding it, then you get zero performance. You can. Yeah. So perhaps they're in a difficult position, but I don't really want to.
You're probably Wi-Fiing the wrong way. That's probably what the problem is, or you're Bluetoothing the wrong way.
I'm sure Apple will fix all of these things. In the meantime, though, I would like to just quickly talk about how the M1 facilitates the situation I'm now in, where I'm working back on Mac and PC. I've always had PCs around. I've always had a gaming PC, but for my work, I would typically, for the last few years anyway, I've been using Mac OS. Ever since the HP laptop debacle,
that kind of started your whole channel.
Yeah. Someone accused me the other day, and some comments on that, of being full of it and a total liar about all of that.
Full of what?
Full of...
Doesn't matter. A liar. Yeah. Right. Really? Okay, well, if that person is listening, let me assure you he was not, because I had to work with it, and I had to work with Mr. Grumpy Chops here, it's HP Spectre, not working, and then when it coming back with different screws, and it was atrocious, despite being aesthetically one of the nicest laptops I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It was a disaster. And it should be noted as well for regular viewers that every time he goes on a Windows foray, he tries to suck me down the evil path with him. He's just like, do you know what? I've been thinking about it. I really think Windows is the way to go. And then that's when I end up with Dell XPSs with the webcam in silly places, like down here.
View.
So that
That was a tough year, that.
That was not a winner. So, while I encourage you to subscribe to this channel and the main Constant Geekery channel if you haven't already, because Dave has some really good insights. Don't believe everything he says.
I don't always get it right. Hey, I like to mix it up a bit, Pete. So talking about mixing it up a bit, the M1, what it does have going for it, because I feel we should balance out the criticisms with some good things. To get the same level of raw performance in an Intel Mac, you would be spending north of $2,000, wouldn't you?
Easily.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, it's knocking on the door. It's not quite there, but it's knocking on the door of the i9 8 core that's in the iMac that we've got in the studio. It's not quite as quick, but it's not far off, and that cost rather more than $2,000, as I recall. So you can buy a computer now that can offer massive performance, and it's very cheap. And regardless of what Apple do next, bringing out an M2 or an M1X or whatever, simple truth is it's not an expensive computer for the level of raw performance it offers. So for someone like me who is, tied to macOS for some of our work stuff, and I need access to Final Cut Pro, which is macOS only. I need access to Logic Pro, which is macOS only. So I've got a few things that I need the Mac for, and I need a reasonably good performer to access that stuff. But what I really want is an incredibly powerful machine to run DaVinci Resolve. And to buy an incredibly powerful machine at this moment in time, you've got to go with one of the Intel Macs, which is going to cost an absolute fortune, and you've got no guarantee of long-term support with it.
I see your dilemma.
However, if you go down the PC route, because I'm basically using my PC for games and for DaVinci Resolve. And once you load up DaVinci Resolve on the PC or the Mac, there's no difference. It takes over the screen, looks exactly the same. So,
yeah.
But in the PC, I can have NVIDIA graphics cards with the NVIDIA encoder and decoder, which is way better than AMD. And
well, when you say you can have them,
yeah, that's it. Do you know what? I ordered the thing without Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. So do you know what I did, Pete?
What did you do?
I just went and bought a Bluetooth and Wi-Fi card. I took the side off the case and I installed it. That's what I did. And then
You did what?
I know, right? And then I thought to myself, what I'd really like is another NVMe drive in here. And since I have one in the drawer that I'm not using, I'd like to just install it. So do you know what I did, Pete?
Well, I suspect you're going to talk about some kind of hijinks where you took the side of the case off again and installed it.
I did, yeah, without the need for any tools. And then I thought,
did the glue come apart as you took it apart?
No, it was all pretty straightforward. And then
user
serviceable. And there's a couple of hard drive bays. So I thought to myself, do you know what? I might fill those up. I'll get myself a couple of SATA SSDs. I'll put them in a nice RAID stripe. Going to do a little video about that, so I won't talk any more about it. And do you know what I did, Pete?
I
took the side of the case off, and I just flipping well installed them. It's what I did. And
this is some kind of black magic tomfoolery you're talking about here. Upgrade in 2021.
No. And do you know what? Somewhere down the line, if I want to put a new graphics card in, or indeed a second graphics card, I can just take the side of the case off and put it in. PC users have been making these arguments for a long time, and I'm being a little bit facetious. I'd have rather had a Mac Pro. The build quality and all of the rest of it, the Mac OS, I'd rather do that. However, I'm perfectly happy to make a few small compromises to save a ton of cash because of the M1, which makes it possible. Because I can have a super fast Mac without spending a huge amount of money, and I can have the powerful PC that I want that's a third of the price of a Mac Pro that actually isn't even as fast. So I feel like I've got the best of both worlds, and I do feel that M1 has facilitated that for me, because I still need Mac OS, but I've got a really fast Mac OS computer and I've got a really fast PC. So I'm like the cat with the cream, frankly. Thanks, M1.
There you go. And you did hear that first here, folks. So here's the golden question then. Which machine would you run Farming Simulator on? That wasted that whiskey, didn't it?
The PC for games, yeah. And if anything GPU performance, I'll do it on the PC. Things that I need Mac OS for, where it's CPU performance and other things, I can do that on the Mac Mini. And M1 is fast enough to do that. I genuinely feel that it's probably a niche solution, I'll grant you. But I'm sure there are other people out there like me who have wanted, been almost pulling the trigger on the Mac Pro. And never quite got round to it. And now they find themselves in this weird limbo. Because how long do you think it realistically until a professional can take on an Apple Silicon Mac Pro?
With confidence, it's going to be a couple of years.
Minimum. Surely.
At least, yeah. At least. I'm a fairly optimistic kind of guy, so yeah. But a couple of years at the minimum. And in the meantime, people have got to get on with stuff. And you've been holding fire on the, for those, again, who perhaps don't know the history, you were about to pull the trigger on the 2019 Mac Pro when all this Apple Silicon malarkey was announced. So you arguably have held on and are continuing to hold on the longest. But this does seem like a good interim solution. And I have to say, Windows is a good operating system. I know a few people have raised comments when we've said that before, but it is a good operating system. Mac OS is a good operating system. They all have their pluses. And I don't hate Windows. I would quite happily have a Windows machine for certain aspects of my work. I don't have the distinct use case that Dayv has, so I'm quite happy to stick with the Mac ecosystem. But it's not because I have some aversion to Windows at all. In fact, I spent a big portion of my career in the guts of Windows machines and Windows and Microsoft-based coding systems. So I've got no axe to grind there. They're horses for courses.
I'd like to say as well, because I went through this kind of mental process. It's like I've already been waiting. I waited for the M1 to come out, and it's like, okay, and it's got the little issues and niggles that we spoke about. So at some point, there'll be a pro Apple Silicon machine, maybe the end of this year, or maybe middle of next year. But there's no way I would go and I'd be an early adopter on that, because there'll be more issues and stuff. So you've got to allow another year at least. So you're two, like we said, 2 years minimum, possibly even 3 years. And I'm thinking to myself, if I buy, it just so happened that Lenovo had a great deal on, and I got a 3-year warranty with my computer. Not only did I get about 40% off list price, I got a 3-year warranty, and not like Apple's warranty. This is a next day on-site warranty. So if I got a problem with it, Lenovo send an engineer to my house the next day to fix it. And Apple doesn't even offer that. So I'm looking at it and going, 3 years, and the cost, and you work it out over your 3-year period. You think, what will it be worth at the end? Well, it'll still be a fantastic machine. So if I do want to switch back to Apple, there's some value in it because I got such a good deal on it. It just, everything makes sense. So it's proving to be a perfect stopgap for me. That's mainly how I'm looking at it at the moment. Whether I'll stay on Windows for the long term, I don't know. But I've been really enjoying it.
You like to dabble from time to time.
You've got to, Pete, and especially if people, they watch the channel, they want to listen to advice from people who know what they're talking about. If I never use a Windows machine and I'm saying Mac's better or Windows is better, no, who's gonna trust what I'm saying?
No, that's a fair point. It's a fair point.
So I don't.
That feels like a good point to wind things up on, doesn't it?
It probably does. I hope you found some of that useful. I'm sort of running it back through my mind and wondering how useful this week's podcast episode has been.
Well,
so I think we've learned some lessons.
Hopefully, yeah. Don't be too hasty to pull a chopping board out of its rack.
That's one lesson.
If there's one thing you take away from this week's podcast, yeah, always prepare.
Yeah, and if you're planning to download Microsoft Flight Simulator, don't get too excited because you've got a long wait on your hands, depending on your internet connectivity, of course.
Yeah, in fact, if you're preparing to, or if you're planning to, this goes out on a Monday, so if you're planning to have some flight simulator action at the weekend, you're probably too late. Weekend after.
Yeah.
So something interesting to drop into the mix. So I've got myself a spin bike and an Apple Fitness subscription.
Have you
now.
indeed?
So so some content might be coming on that once I've had a play. I keep threatening content, but it's got to be something of interest for people. So I'm having a play and a dabble, and I'll let you know what I think. I was also thinking about another bit of tech review that I may do, which is kind of fitness related, is maybe looking at one of these Peloton bikes. I don't know if you've seen
They're
those.
very expensive.
They are very expensive, and what's put me off more than anything, it's like a 3 or 4 month wait time to get one.
Not another
story
another thing that you can't
of technology.
buy.
Yeah, and actually Peloton, I know we're trying to wrap this up, but it's just reminded me of something that really irritates me. On their site, they've got the Peloton, which is the original, still an amazing bit of kit. And then you've got the Peloton Plus, which has got a bigger screen and speakers and all sorts of stuff. And both have a long wait time. But what they do is on the Peloton Plus, they put 3 to 4 months wait time. So you look at that and you go, okay, what's the Peloton like? Because I want it sooner. And they put it in weeks, but I think it's like 12 to 17 weeks. But you read it as days. And I was about to hit the button on one, and I thought, hang on a second, they're trying to get rid of their stock by some rather dark UX patterns in my mind, because that's still 3 to 4 months. But they're doing it in weeks. So shame on you, Peloton. Shame on you. Now send me a free bike.
Yeah, we don't mind being sponsored.
Anyway.
In which case...
No.
Actually, I couldn't pedal a bike at the moment anyway, so...
No, you couldn't at all. But yeah, anyway, so Apple Fitness, I will be having a bit of a play with that over the next few weeks, and I'll report my findings back either via this podcast or some other medium.
Look forward to it. Yeah. Good. We should definitely leave it there, because I fear this is yet another very long podcast. So very, very grateful for those who sit through the whole thing. Does anybody sit through the whole thing? If you've got this far, leave us a comment, and then we'll know that you sat through the whole thing, or possibly skipped. I don't know. Skip to the end.
Anyway, thank you for listening, and thank you for all our new subscribers. We are gradually ticking those up. Really, really quite encouraging on that. So please, if you think of anyone who you think might enjoy the dronings on of two middle-aged men who probably don't know that much, then by all means share the podcast with them.
Thank you. And please subscribe to our main channel on YouTube as well if you haven't done so already. It's youtube.com/Constant Geekery. We were hoping to get to 10,000 subs by the end of 2020, and we did not. So, but we are knocking on the door of about 9,200 now, so it's within grasp. And once we get to 10,000, I do feel that we will be doing some more interesting things. We do have some interesting stuff planned, but we need to know that there's an audience for it.
We do.
So.
An audience, and also not a lockdown.
Yeah, that kind of has stopped things as well. Anyway, that was a sufficient little bit of carrot dangling right at the end there of the podcast. And when it comes to dangling things, a carrot's probably better than some other things. Just saying. And on that thought, I think we should just say...
On that vegetable-based note...
thanks for watching. We'll see you again next week for the Constant Geekery Podcast.
Cheerio. What a load of waffle.